everyone. Today we're going to be learning how to solve practical problems or word problems by writing and solving equations. Now remember, we can solve word problems in a number of different ways. We can draw a picture, we can think through it, we can act it out. Today we're going to talk about how to write an equation based on the word problem and then solve that equation to get your answer. So when we do this, the first thing I want to do is define my variables. And all that does is you're picking a variable or a letter that's going to represent your unknown value. You can pick any letter that you want. I like to pick something that makes sense in context, but you can pick any letter. We do want to stay away from letters that look like numbers, like O or a lowercase l, where it might be confused between, is this a letter or is this a 0? Is it a 1? Okay. But other than that, the variable that you use is not important as long as you define it first. So your variable should answer the question of your problem. Okay, so when I start to define my variable, I'm actually going to look at where is the question. So let's look at my first example. One cell phone company charges $35 each month and charges $15 for every gigabyte of data used. This month, Juan's cell phone bill was $110. How many gigabytes of data did he use? So my first step is to define my variable. So I'm going to look at the question. How many gigabytes of data did he use? My variable should answer that question. So G, I'm going to pick G as my letter because I'm working with gigabytes of data. You can pick X or you can pick Y, all of that's fine. I just like to use something that's relevant in context. So I'm going to use G. So I'm going to let G equal whatever the answer to this question is. How many gigabytes of data? So my answer is G represents however many gigabytes of data was used. Once I've represented my variable, I'm going to use that variable to write an equation based on the information that they give me in the word problem. So I like to read the problem again, and I like to circle and pull out any relevant information that I'm going to need for this. So Juan's cell phone company charges $35 each month. So I know that at the beginning of the month, no matter how many gigabytes of data he's used, Juan has to pay that $35. And so I'm going to add to that $15 for every gigabyte of data. Now, that's not just $15. Okay, if he uses 1 gigabyte of data, then yes, it's $15. But if he uses 2 gigabytes of data, then it goes up from there. It's $30. If he uses 3 gigabytes, now he's at $45. So I'm going to represent this as $15 times the number of gigabytes. Well, just in my last step, I determined that I'm going to use G to represent that number, whatever it happens to be. So $15 for every gigabyte gives me that 15G. Okay. This month, Juan's cell phone bill was $110. Now, 110 is a special value here because it is our total. In most of the problems you're given, you are going to have a total given to you. And your total, when you write your equation, should be all by itself on one side. Okay? I personally prefer my total to be over here on the right side of the equation. Not sure why we turned red. But the configuration of your equation may look different than mine, and I'm going to talk about that here in just a second. No matter how you write your equation, though, your 110, your total, should be all by itself on one side of the equal sign. Okay, your total should be by itself. Then I can start writing my equations based on the information that I have. On the left side, I know that Juan is already paying $35. Plus, he's going to pay $15 for every gigabyte. So I used my 110, I used my 35, and I used my 15G. Okay, to me, this is the easiest way for me to set up this equation. Okay, if you like to start with your total first, 110 equals that 35 plus 15G, that's perfectly fine. If you would rather your variable term come first, 15G, and then you're going to add in the $35 that he has to pay every month, and then your 110 is going to be on the right side, that's fine. And if you even want to switch these and do 110 on this side, and then 15G plus 35, all of those represent the same thing. Okay, so while your equation may not look exactly the same as mine, most of it should still be the same. The 15 should go with the G. At some point, that needs to be added to the 35, whether that's on this side. Is it 35 first, then 15? That part doesn't matter as much as making sure that the relationships, the 15 times the G, the 35 plus that term, is being represented appropriately. Okay, so any of these equations is okay. I'm just going to solve one of them. So once I've written my equation, now it's time to solve. Come on. Okay. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to solve the equation that they gave me. So I've got 35 plus 15G equals 110. And I'm going to solve this the exact same way I've been solving equations all unit long. I'm going to try to get my variable term alone, 15G, which means I need to get rid of 35 by subtracting. My 35s reduced to 0, they go away. And I'm left with just 15G equals 110 minus 35 is 75. Okay. Then I need G to be alone. So I'm going to divide by 15. And my result is that G is equal to 5. Okay. So I found that G equals 5. That's all well and good. The last step when I'm solving a word problem is to answer the question in context. Okay, and all that really requires is going back to the question part. How many gigabytes of data did he use? Okay, we found that our answer was 5, but we need to put that answer in a way that makes sense so that it can stand by itself. I can't just walk up and say, oh, 5. Okay, 5 what? 5 cookies, 5 ponies, 5 hours of sunshine today. Okay, it's important that you're going back and you're answering the question. So the question said, how many gigabytes of data did he use? The answer is 1 used 5 gigabytes of data. Okay, 5 as a number by itself does not mean anything. Okay, we have to say that that 5 is the number of gigabytes. Okay, so if we follow this process, we should be able to solve word problems. Okay, let's look at another example. So the first thing I'm going to do is define my variables. Let's read the question. Megan started the weekend with $32 in her wallet. She picked up a babysitting job at a rate of $12 per hour. If Megan finished the weekend with $140, how many hours did she babysit? So the first thing I want to do is define my variable. And remember that I'm going to do that by looking at the question of the word problem. How many hours did she babysit? So I'm looking for the number of hours. And that's what I'm going to use to figure out what my variable represents. H, I'm going to use H. You can use X or P or Q or whatever works for you. H represents the number of hours she babysat. Okay. Once I have my variable defined, now I can start writing my equation. So I'm going to look for relevant information in the question. Megan started the weekend with $32. So she's already got $32. She picked up a babysitting job at a rate of $12 per hour. So to represent that, that's going to be 12 times the number of hours, which I'm going to use H to represent that. Lastly, she finished the weekend with $140. That's my total. Now, as we write this, remember that your total always goes on one side of the equal sign. I personally like to put it over here on the right side, so I'm going to put 140 there all by itself. Then I'm going to look at this. She started with $32. Then she got $12 for every hour she was babysitting. Okay. Now remember, your equation might look a little different. You might put 12H first, 12 hours of babysitting plus the $35 she started with. You might do 140, your total first, and then the $32. Oops, this should be 32. And then the 12 hours the $12 per hour she made babysitting. Or maybe you're going to do 140 first equals, and then your $12 an hour, and then your $32 that she already had. Remember, the order of this doesn't matter, but it's important that your total 140 is all by itself, and then your H and your 12 are connected together, $12 per hour. Now that I've written my equation, I can go ahead and solve it. So my equation says 32 plus 12H equals 140. I need my variable term to be alone. My variable term is 12H. So I need to get rid of 32 by subtracting 32 from both sides. 32 minus 32 reduces to 0, they go away. 12H comes down, 140 minus 32 equals 108. Then I need 12 to go away, so I'm going to divide by 12 on both sides. And I'm left with H equals 108 divided by 12 equals 9. Now, 9 is all well and good, but my very last step is to answer the actual question. Okay, 9 could represent anything. 9 sprinkles, 9 days of snow, 9 centimeters. Okay, 9 could represent anything. So I need to then go back and clarify what that 9 means. And if you look back at your H equals 9, and I look back here at where I defined my variables, that 9 represents number of hours of babysitting. So the answer to my question is Megan babysat for 9 hours. And that answers the question. And you can double check that by saying, how many hours did she babysit? Megan babysat for 9 hours. Double check those. Read your question and then read your answer and see if they go together. Okay. Now that we've seen a few examples, let's try some on our own. So I'm going to help you define the variables and write the equation, and then I'm going to let you solve that equation and therefore answer the question. So let's take a look. To send a package, the post office charges a flat rate of 67 cents per item and a fee of 42 cents for each ounce. If Dominic had to pay $3.19 to send one package, how many ounces did this package weigh? So remember that ounces are a measurement of weight. They're how heavy something is. So the post office says, hey, give me 67 cents. Then for however heavy your package is, give me 42 cents for each ounce, and I'll ship it for you. Dominic walked in. He said it's going to be $3.19. So I'm trying to figure out how many ounces did the package weigh. Now, this is where I was talking about being careful with your variable selection with what number you, or excuse me, what letter you want to use as a variable. I don't want to use O. O looks too much like 0. Okay, it's too easy to confuse. So I'm just going to use X on this one. Okay, and I'm going to let X represent the answer to this question, which is how many ounces? So this is going to be the number of ounces. Okay. Now that I have my variable, I can write my equation based on the information they give me in the question. So to send the package, the post office charges a flat rate of 67 cents per item. So he's only sending one item, and a flat rate means it doesn't change. That is your cost. So I've got 0.67, 67 cents. And it's also going to be 42 cents for each ounce. It's not just 42 cents, it's 42 cents for each ounce. Well, I know I'm using X to represent my number of ounces. So this is going to be 42 cents times however many ounces it's going to be. In this case, I'm using an X to represent that. If Dominic had to pay $3.19, that's going to be my total. And we know that that's going to go all by itself on one side of the equal sign. So I'm going to put my $3.19 on one side of the equal sign all by itself. I like to put mine on the right side. Then I've got the 67 cents that Dominic has to pay for his one package. And then plus the 42 cents times however many ounces for the weight requirement. Okay, remember that this can look a little bit different. You can put the $3.19 first, then do your 0.67 plus your 0.42x. You can do that same thing, but with my 0.42x first and then my 0.67, or I can do 0.42x plus 0.67 equals $3.19. Any way that you can figure this is fine, as long as $3.19 is by itself and your 0.42x and your 0.67 are being added together. Okay, so now that I have my equation, I want you to solve it. Okay, I want you to solve this equation. 0.67 plus 0.42x equals 3.19. Now, just because these are decimals does not mean that I treat it any differently. Okay, so what I want you to do is pause the video. I want you to solve this equation, come up with an answer, and then I want you to answer the question in context. I want you to say, Dominic's package weighed however many ounces. When you're finished with that, you can come back to the video and check your answers against my answers. All right, to solve my equation, I first want to get my variable term alone. So I need 0.42x to be by itself. So I've got to get rid of this 0.67 by subtracting. Then I need to get the x by itself by dividing by 0.42. Again, just because these are decimals does not mean that I treat this any differently. Put this in Desmos and find your answer, then put this in Desmos and find your answer. Okay. Lastly, I need to answer the question. So even though I got x equals 6, 6 by itself is not an answer to this problem. Okay. 6 doesn't mean anything until I actually put it back into the question. So the question says, how many ounces? The answer is 6 ounces. Okay, so Dominic's package weighed 6 ounces. Okay. In this one, I'm going to define your variable, but then I want you to try to write the equation. So Anna and Ben went to an apple picking orchard. They paid $3.50 for admission and $2.50 for each pound of apples that they picked. If Anna and Ben spent $16 total for their trip, how many pounds of apples did they pick? Okay, so when I define my variables, I need to look at the question. The question says, how many pounds of apples did they pick? Okay, I'm going to use P to represent the answer to that question. So how many pounds? P is going to equal the number of pounds of apples. Okay. With that in mind, see if you can pick out the numbers from this word problem and write an equation that could be used to find the number of pounds of apples that they ended up with. Okay, pause the video, see if you can write this equation, and then come back here and check your answer with my answer. So they paid $3.50 for admission. So $3.50 to start with. And they paid $2.50 for each pound of apples. So this is $2.50 times the number of pounds of apples that they used. I'm going to use P to represent that because that's what I defined down here. They spent $16 total, so that's my total. And that goes all by itself on one side of the equal sign. I like to put mine on the right side. And then my $3.50 plus my $2.50 per pound. Now, like I said, yours may not look exactly like this. You may have one of the following options. If you had any of these options, 16 equals 3.50 plus 2.50p, or 16 equals 2.50p plus 3.50, or 2.5p plus 3.50 equals 16. Important things are that 16 is all by itself, and my 2.5 is what's connected to p. As long as you have one of these, you've written the correct equation. Now that you've done that, let's go ahead and solve this problem and answer the question. Pause your video, solve the equation, and then come back and check your answer against mine. All right, when we solve our equation, we need to get rid of the 3.50 first because I want 2.50p to be alone. So I subtract that away. Then I'm going to get rid of 2.50 by dividing, and I should end up with p equals 5. Remember that then I need to put my answer in context. The question was, how many pounds of apples did they pick? So the answer is 5 pounds of apples. All right. Number 5, I want you to try entirely on your own. It says, a video game streaming site allows users to play video games for $4.50 each. They also charge a one-time subscription fee of $29. If a user paid a total of $56 this month, how many games did they play? Okay, I want you to define your variables based on the question in the word problem. I want you to write an equation, solve that equation, and then tell me the answer to the question. Okay, make sure to show all your work. Go ahead and pause the video now, work this out, and then come back and check your answers against my answers. So my question here is, how many games did they play? Meaning that my variable should answer that question and represent the number of games. I personally picked G, but you can pick any letter as long as you're using that to represent the number of games that the user played. Next, we're going to pull some information out of our problem. Be careful with this beginning part. Your video games are $4.50 each. So that should be $4.50 times the number of games. Okay, so 4.50G. My one-time subscription fee is just a straight up plain 29. And then my total is 56. Your equation can look like any of these 4 equations. All of those are correct. As long as you have 56 by itself, and as long as you have G with 450, or whatever your variable is. You could have used X As long as your 450 and your variable are connected and your 56 is by itself and you're adding that 29 somewhere, any of these is correct. All right, when you solve this equation, no matter which equation you use, when you solve this, we need to get rid of 29 first, so we're going to subtract. Then I need to move g away from 4.50, so I'm going to divide 4.50 on both sides. That gives me g equals 6. And finally, I need to actually use that number to answer the question. The question said, how many games did they play? So my answer is that the user played 6 games. Okay, G represents my number of games. That's 6, so they played 6 games. If you have any questions, make sure to write them down and bring them to class. Otherwise, I will answer them then.